hello. No, okay. All right, so we've got all that stuff out of the way. So what we're going to do in this week is I'm going to intersperse some videos of me. It's very exciting with some videos I found online that might deal with the readings at hand. I found something interesting that explains a little bit about the promise. So I think I'm going to have Dr. Chatterjee, it needs to be edited down. Dr. Chatterjee will cut it off after about 10 minutes, I think. That's going to follow this film. And then I'll record something on readings 2 and 3. So your readings for this week are readings 1, 2, and 3. Your first reading is The Promise by C. Wright Mills. C. Wright Mills was a sociologist in the middle of the 20th century, about 60, 70 years ago. And he was very influential in sociology, specifically his notion of what's called the sociological imagination. So The Promise in this reading is from a book called The Sociological Imagination, and he talks about the promise that can come from seeing the world from a sociological perspective. So I want to try to explain kind of what that entails a little bit, and the little 10-minute video you're going to watch after this will explain it even better. The most important thing that I think you need to understand is that Mills talked about the difference between personal troubles and public issues. So, for example, you get laid off from work, right? And the economy's booming, nobody else is getting laid off from work, but you find yourself unemployed. That's a personal trouble. Maybe you're a bad employee, maybe you showed up late for work, maybe they just don't like that smug look on your face, but you've lost your job. You've lost your job in an economy that's doing well, unemployment isn't very high. It's probably a personal trouble. It's probably something that's affecting you, and it's not something that impacts society at large, or your job outlook or your unemployment isn't impacted by society at large. But let's say that you make widgets, and this is a developing economy and people don't need widgets anymore, or they just use the widget app on their phone, and all the widget factories are shutting down. So your unemployment is part of a public issue. So the sociological imagination, and that's a simplistic version, but it allows you to see your life from a bigger perspective and allowed to see the bigger issues at hand. So another idea is marriage. So if you find that you're struggling in your marriage and your spouse doesn't appreciate all the hard work you do, and they complain about how incredibly lazy you are, playing Candy Crush or Bejeweled or Age of Empires or I don't know, whatever those games are, and your partner wants a divorce, and the divorce rate hasn't fluctuated much, and there really isn't any issue with marriage or relationships in the country or in society, we're thinking about societies, then it might be a personal trouble. But if your marriage is on the rocks and you see, if you look out into the world, the divorce rate is high, there are problems in marriages around society, that might be a public issue. So public issues affect the person on a very deep level, and many times, they do many times. So another example is, let's say that you've decided that you have had enough of this world and you're going to end your life. You might have heard last week about the pilot who took a plane out in Seattle and dove it into an island, said that he thought he had a screw loose. But the decision to take your own life is a very personal decision. And it's usually something that people do alone. They make that decision in their heads. They don't discuss it with many people. But the suicide rate amongst black women is 10 times lower than the suicide rate amongst white men. So the white male suicide rate is probably about 40 per 100,000, and the black female suicide rate is about 3 or 4 per 100,000. So that tells us that even in the most personal of decisions, society has an effect. What is it about society and how it socializes, how it acculturates, how it trains, how it creates white males versus how it creates black females that makes their suicide rates so far lower than for white men. What is it about being a black female that makes them able to overcome whatever, maybe not overcome is the right word, makes them find another outlet or another vehicle for expressing themselves, or another deviant act, because suicide is a deviant act, as you remember from Social 170. But for white men, for some reason, the suicide rate is 10 times higher. So what is it about that? So personal troubles and public issues. If the suicide rate is very high amongst white men, and the suicide rate is actually rising across the board. So if the suicide rate is rising and people commit suicide, it might be a personal trouble, but if you look at the reasons and the rationale why that person committed suicide, it very well might be a public issue. And Mills, in this reading, and it's kind of hard to get through, so take your time with it, but in this reading, Mills talks about how we get through the hurly-burly of life, and this is in the 50s with technological advancements, so think about how things have changed now. He talks about how we feel detached from our own identities, from our own selves. We feel detached from life. We feel like we're just kind of rolling along through life without any direction, without any control over our own lives. And Mills thought that if we were able to connect our personal experiences with social experiences, with public experiences, we would develop a connection with society, and that would help to ground us and to help us find a place in society. If we know that whatever is happening to us, whether we're contemplating suicide or we're getting married or we're going through a divorce, that has happened to many, many, many people, and probably is happening at the moment that you are going through whatever you're going through many, many times over. And other people are experiencing the same thing you are. And what you're experiencing very well might be a public issue. Not everything is a public issue. There are personal troubles. But if you suffer from alcoholism and the alcoholism rate is high and it's causing public harm, then that's a public issue. So Mills talked about the importance of seeing society at large in what we do, and looking around at the world and seeing how not only how we are shaped by the world, but how we shape other people, because our actions also help to shape other people. But the promise is, it's a promise of a fuller life if we're able to see ourselves in society and see our actions and our reactions to the world and how it manifests itself across society at large. So that's reading one. Your next video is from a professor. It's pretty well done. It kind of explains a little bit more of the detail of the first three readings. Your reading, The Promise, which starts on page 1, and it goes to page 6. So it's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 pages. Less than that. Couple things words I want to provide some definitions for. In the first paragraph right here on page 1, the word vicariously. If you move vicariously through life, or if you experience something vicariously, you're doing it secondhand. It's like the VR, right? A VR headset, right? You're going through a roller coaster, but you're experiencing it vicariously. It's done secondhand. It's done through something else. So when Mills says that in other milieu, they move vicariously and remain spectators. By the way, milieu, M-I-L-L-I-E-U-X. Milieu means environment. It's a French word that means environment. In fact, it says right there at the bottom, social environment. So vicariously means you experience something secondhand. It's almost like there's a shroud around you when you experience it. You guys understand what I'm saying. On page 3, the big Roman numeral 1, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down the word welter. It enables him to take into account how individuals in the welter of their daily experience, welter means the confused mess, chaos, that's what it means. This is not representative of the readings you're going to have. This is maybe there's 4 or 5 of these that are very research oriented, hard to get through, not written by a famous writer, but written by a sociologist. Read this one slow, please. Your brain, which happens to me all the time, this is a whole book that it happens to me. You'll read through a page and you'll get to here and your brain stopped up here. So try to read it slowly, take your time with it, and I'm going to have some questions for you that hopefully I will go over when your homework is passed out by Dr. Chatterjee here, and I'll explain what the questions for your homework are. Remember, personal troubles, public issues. Personal troubles that happen to you, public issues are issues that cause a problem in society. Issues transcend local environments of the individual and the range of his inner life. Troubles occur within the character of the individual and within the immediate range of himself and others. So it looks at war and marriage and other things. So it's a short reading, but please take your time with it. Okay, now you're going to watch the video from that professor.